This week on Quadriga, China's new leaders, communism, capitalism, and corruption. China's Communist Party is preparing to hold its Congress when the successor to President Hu Jintao will be announced. That will most likely be Vice President Xi Jinping. The next generation of leaders in Beijing will oversee a period where the true extent of China's power will become apparent. China is an economic powerhouse and is beginning to stretch its military muscles. But the scandal surrounding disgraced former party secretary Bo Xilai and industrial unrest show there are serious internal tensions. Can the new leadership extend Beijing's influence, or has China reached its limits? Your host this week, Melinda Crane.
Hello and welcome to Quadriga. What direction will China's new leaders take the country in? That's what we want to talk about today with three Berlin-based experts who follow events in China closely. Gudrun Wacker is Senior Fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Her special areas are Chinese foreign and security policy and domestic developments there. Lea Zhou is editor-in-chief of the Chinese language weekly newspaper, the Epoch Times Europe, and she has also reported from Berlin for the Voice of America. And Sven Hansen is an editor on the Asia desk of the Berlin-based newspaper, the Taz. He has reported from Hong Kong and travels frequently in Asia. So welcome to all of you. Lea Zhou, let's start out with corruption, because that, of course, has been in the headlines a great deal lately. According to the official Chinese news agency, Xinhua, the party is about to embark on a new 5-year plan to fight corruption. The question is, do you think they really mean it?
I think the Chinese people don't really interested in that question anymore, because that the party is releasing new policy all the time since 30 years. So I think the Chinese citizens are quite tired of such kind of discussions. But it's very interesting for us in abroad to know what's going on in this country.
Apparently, the New York Times reported, at least, that there is corruption right to the very, very top. They've been reporting that the family of Prime Minister Wen Jiabao has up to $3 billion socked away in various companies and very complicated directorships and so on. That makes the prior cases of corruption look almost like peanuts. What are people in China saying about that?
There are a lot of discussions about this. Of course, a lot of people think corruption belongs to this party system. So it's nothing new that Chinese leaders are corrupt or their family members. But very interesting is the time that this report is coming out, because it's right before the 18th Party Congress. So the one who will be damaged, that is Wen Jiabao for sure. And people are asking who has delivered such kind of materials to the journalist. Of course, the journalist has done wonderful work, no doubt. But still, I've heard from many journalists in China, they have got a package delivered to their bureau several weeks ago. But I know the New York Times journalist, he has begun his work for quite a long time. But there is still a question.
Gudrun Wacker, what impact do you think these latest corruption allegations are likely to have?
First of all, I think we should make a difference between corruption and the system of networks that exist in China, where the family members of high political personalities have access to good jobs, to better jobs, to CEO jobs of big companies. So there is sort of a, let's say, a legal side to that and the more corruption side to that.
That would be the system that people talk about as princelings, right? That
the princelings just means that the person in question is the son or the daughter of a old revolutionary first-generation personality. That doesn't mean that the people necessarily have the same opinions. But the way the Chinese system works is that you have a system of guanxi, of relationships, and that, of course, the family members of these high personalities like Bo Xilai, Xi Jinping, there was another report on him and his family's fortune by Bloomberg.
The presumed new leader.
Yes. and now the Wen Jiabao one. So the family simply has access to very, very lucrative jobs. And then there is a fluid border to corruption, I would say. So there is a difference. The impact I hear from people from China that nothing they have seen in the New York Times report is worse than what is talked about in China anyway. If you talk to people in China, I mean, there is a lot of knowledge around about these things. I think there are some specialized Weibo microblog sites that follow personalities and look, for example, what kind of watch does the person wear to see could there be corruption involved. So this is a normal phenomenon, and Lea is right. I mean, for the last 15 years at least, the Communist Party leadership has said this is a matter of life and death for the Communist Party, the corruption problem, but nothing really decisive has happened because it's all within the system.
Sven Hansen, would you agree with that, or could it get to a tipping point at which corruption does become extremely problematic for the party?
No, it could come to that point, and but I would agree what Gudrun has said. It has been acknowledged as a problem for a long time, but decisive measures haven't been taken. Decisive measures would have been to install checks and balances and some kind of concurrence or competition, much more about competition for different posts and much more transparency. And what we see now, after the report came out on Wen Jiabao, that transparency was not the issue. The censorship was enforced. So
the New York Times website is still blocked.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, and of course, I mean, corruption comes. Big corruption cases come up once a while, and usually in times of power struggles. So then it is opportune for one side to come to spread certain informations to attack the adversary. And this time we don't know. It might have happened also as that the new infos came out the same day as Bo Xilai was kicked out of the party. So it can be a tit for tat.
Just reminding our viewers who don't follow events perhaps as closely as you do.
He was a member of the Politburo, and he was the former head of the Chongqing Party Committee. I mean, the biggest city in China, and he was very eager, very ambitious to become a member of the standing committee of the Politburo, so the leading organ. And he was a kind of adversary of Wen Jiabao, or at least Wen Jiabao.
And it's his wife who was accused of committing murder.
But I mean, he probably was, at least probably he knew about it. Probably he was even maybe part of the conspiracy. We don't know. But anyway, at the moment, it is, or the last few months, it is obvious that there is a kind of power struggle, and the side of Wen Jiabao so far had the upper hand, but now it is a kind of a revenge thing. Or I mean, that's the speculation. We don't know exactly, and that is a big problem in fighting corruption, that you would need more transparency, and the party is not ready for that. And it's also not ready for real checks and balances. So it is, as Lea said, probably another announcement, and maybe next time we have another announcement. So
maybe we should say that if we want to put it very simply, Bo Xilai was more a leftist populist. He tried to appeal to the people in Chongqing and did some very popular things. And the fact that he was ousted shows that there was sort of a power struggle going on against the leftist, and that what he tried with his populist approach to politics did not go down well with the Chinese leadership that is more collectively oriented. And now with Wen Jiabao, you have sort of an attack to the reformist camp, because Wen Jiabao was the one who used to speak out for political reforms, especially when he was abroad. We don't know how serious this was, but the fact is that the Chinese press never reported about Wen Jiabao's appeals. So now we see we can even speculate whether the international press has been instrumentalized in a way to play a certain role in the Chinese power struggle. But this is speculation, of course.
Yeah, and on the other hand, I mean, what has come out in the report of the New York Times, these things were in the, let's say, in the sphere of rumors for months already. This now was that it was first time written down and it was given some flesh. So, but the rumors were circulating for a long time. So now it's an interesting question: what does the timing mean? But that's we can only guess.
I'd like to come back to the question of how deep the public frustration is. You talk about populism, the attempt to appeal to the people. How frustrated are they, Lea Zhou? One of the things, of course, that the government had always, the implicit deal was that it delivers economic growth and then it doesn't perhaps have to deliver reform. Economic growth has, however, been tapering off some. To what degree are people in China worried about their economic situation?
There are a lot of statistics, there are a lot of figures, but I think I don't like to use the figures in this short time. There's one thing that there's a very interesting sign which abnormal. If you see there are a lot of Chinese buyers, for example, in Berlin, when we go to Kudamm, we'll see a lot of shops. You see the people don't only buy luxury goods, luxury watches or bags, but they go to Rossmann, they go to the shops, they buy a lot of milk powder. And this is a kind of frustration because they don't believe in the control or in the government. They don't believe that the producers, they will follow some restrictions. So I think the people are quite frustrated, and you see there is no demand. There's in abroad the Chinese buyers buy a lot of luxury goods, but the consume of the luxury good in China has been reduced in this year, and it's a very difficult situation, and it shows the people don't have any belief in this country.
Gudrun Wacker, a report by the World Bank says that things have to change economically in China. Would you agree with that? And do you think that the new leadership is in a position to start that process?
Well, that's the $1,000,000 question, or even more dollars question. I think what is important about this World Bank report, it's about China 2030 and the steps that China will have to take in order to avoid getting into some middle income trap. So it would be stuck on the value-added ladder. It would not achieve what it really is its aspiration to become a society of innovation and of climbing up the value-added ladder. China does not want to stay where it is now. But this will require some reforms. And the interesting thing is that there was a Chinese institute involved in producing this World Bank report, and that it is said that Li Keqiang, the likely successor of Wen Jiabao, endorsed this report in a way, or at least acknowledged it. And I think it's the steps that are laid out in this report are very important, because we see that in the last 10 years under the present leadership or the outgoing leadership, there is not much happened in terms of economic reform. On the contrary, I think that China has developed into something like a state capitalist system where the state-owned enterprises have all the privileges. They get easy money from the banks. They get easy access to resources. So in a way, the system, the structure of the Chinese economy is biased to the state-owned enterprises, and they're much more powerful than they were in the 1990s. So what the World Bank report says is more privatization is needed, better protection of the farmers who own or don't own but have the land are needed, and several steps like this. Now the question is whether the new leadership can take this up. And even if they're willing to do it, whether they will be able to implement it. Because the problem that I think is now very widely acknowledged in China is that there are vested interests that are so keen to keep the status quo, because this is their lifeline, that they will put up a lot of obstacles, even if the new leadership is willing to take on these issues. And that's a big question.
Let us take a brief look at the new leadership. Rumors are circulating that they might be willing to make some changes. Let's take a look at who they are presumed to be.
China's presumed leader-in-waiting is Vice President Xi Jinping. Over the last 12 months, he has embarked on a charm offensive, meeting leaders around the globe. While eager to smile for the cameras, Xi has kept his opinions about the world a mystery. Unlike President Hu Jintao, Xi matured politically in an era of reform, and his brand of government may reflect that. If he becomes leader, Xi will inherit a country enjoying economic power that many other countries would be envious of. But he will have problems dealing with inequalities in Chinese society. A corrupt elite and a widening gap between rich and poor have raised questions in the minds of many Chinese of whether the country is going in the right direction.
What do you think, Sven Hansen? What is likely to be the willingness of the new leadership, and are the structural barriers, the vested interests that Gudrun Wacker just mentioned, so strong that even if there's willingness, it might be impossible to effect real change?
Yeah, so far we don't see any intention for fundamental reform. The signals we get are more for continuation. We think things have to change. Also, many Chinese think things have to change. I think there might probably be smaller changes. Like yesterday, there was a report
Let's talk about what kind of change.
Yeah,
we love these words like reform and change.
For example, yesterday there was an official institution questioning the one-child policy. I mean, these are important things, but I think, there has been a debate about the one-child policy for a couple of years already, and China is aging very fast, so it has to change sooner or later. So I think these reforms we probably can expect. But it is not the way that now the potentially new leaders announce these changes or have a platform on reforms. It is more that they hide everything and they don't portray themselves as reformers, because this would endanger them for any attacks. So the signals we get is more a continuation, and then if they are in power later, they might act. And I think that's a big problem, especially for us in Western countries, where we are used that people who want to take a public office before tell us what is their program, and then we can choose which program and which person we like, and then so this Chinese system is very different. And the leaders,
sometimes they tell us their programs, sometimes they don't, if they're Mitt Romney.
Yeah, no, I talk about Chinese leaders. You won't get up very high in China probably if you have an explicit program. So,
as we see in the case of Bo Xilai, who really tried this, populist approach.
Yeah, but even he didn't have a real program. It was a different style, and that style was not welcome.
And Xi Jinping is not alone. Maybe he has the will to make some changes, but you are right. We have to define the words. What does it mean with change or
What's
reform?
at the top of your list? What do you think most needs to be changed in China as quickly as possible?
Of course, the political system. A really reform in the political system is on the agenda. Everybody knows that because we have this economic reform since 30 years, and we know what kind of price the Chinese citizens, they have already paid for that. So I think also the party members, they do know there is no way if they will not do any really reform on the political system. But it is very, very difficult because Xi Jinping doesn't only need the will to do that, he also needs a lot of support, and he needs the courage to do that. And now you see there are a lot of party elders appear in the public view in the last few days. So they are showing they are all playing a role. So Xi Jinping, even though he will be the new president, he cannot decide alone.
So Gudrun Wacker, does this take us back to possible reasons for a shot across the bow in the sense of a warning signal to Xi Jinping in this corruption battle that is occurring? Because you mentioned possibly a signal to reformist forces, be careful.
Well, I think the battle is not over, obviously. And, I mean, we simplify things. We actually don't know what is going on. It's all speculation. This is how the system works on this high level. There is no transparency. And it's all in the Western press. You will not find reports like that in the Chinese press, because there simply is no announcement. You can only sort of deduct what is going on behind the scene. So we don't even know, will the new group, the leadership, will it be 7 people or 9 people, like at present? This will make a difference, but it's a collective leadership where you have to build consensus. And I think Xi Jinping did not get where he is because he came out with very bold ideas, but because he is the person who can be trusted to build this consensus. And this is how, on the top level, the leadership works. So I think Lea is right that there needs to be a lot of support. And where is this coming from? So we actually, I mean, for the time being, we will not see a lot of bold steps. We now have the party congress.
What kind of incremental steps might we see, if any?
Well, I think for the time being, we probably will see some efforts to stabilize economic growth, especially if there are signs of a slowdown. And we will have a focus on what is considered stability in China. I mean, we talked a lot about the frustration of the people, but we have to see that most of the unrest is local. It's not nationwide uproar. It's local issues that drive people's dissatisfaction, and then there are countermeasures either by, throwing money at the problem or doing something else. Anyway, so I think for the next year, I wouldn't expect any bold reform agenda at all, because we have the leadership change now in the party, and then next March the new government positions will be announced. So this is a generational change that will go on for a while, and then the leaders need some time to settle in, just like our governments. I mean, if Mitt Romney is elected, he cannot start on day one governing. And it's the same in China, in a way. They have to settle in. They have to figure out how they will work together. So I wouldn't expect until fall next year that we will see any real, drive. It will go in this direction or that direction.
I would agree. I mean, I don't see neither a readiness nor a willingness for bold change. And from the point of view of the leadership, probably there's still no need for it. And from an outside, I would say you might expect such a change in a situation of national crisis. And this situation is not yet there. Whether it will be there, we don't know. But there is not such a severe crisis situation that the situation demands bold moves. So at the moment, it would be reformist steps, and these might be far-reaching, but I think the pressure is not there. At the same time, the leadership still tries to consolidate its power, the new leadership, and that will take some time.
And I hope it will not take another decade like it took for Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao. I remember 10 years ago we have discussed the same question.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there Are we expecting a Chinese Gorbachev? And nowadays we can say, well, they are not. And I can certainly say Xi Jinping is not a Chinese Gorbachev. But I think he will be certainly the last empire of this Chinese communist dynasty, I would like to say, because if he begins to begin with the reforms, with the political reforms, the Chinese party will not be the ruling party, for sure, if there is really a democratic election. If he won't change, he won't do anything and just keep the time going, and maybe there will be a revolution, and that is something that we don't like to see. Anyhow, I don't think this party system can continue very, very long. And if we see the economy is cooling down now, normally there are three ways to keep the economy growth on a certain level. That is to increase the export, that is to increase the domestic demand, and government investment. The export cannot be increased now because Europe and America, there is a global crisis now, and the domestic demand can also not be increased, and we have seen that in the last decade.
Some measures were taken after 2008. There was a fairly significant stimulus program put in place by the Chinese government.
A lot of money. So the corruption is also getting worse and worse. So if the money is flowing into the projects for infrastructure, for example, so there's a lot of opportunity to get money, and now they're doing the same. From January to August, the Committee for Development in China has approved. They have approved 11 airports and 25 railway systems. So it means this is the only instrument that the Communist Party can use now to keep the GDP growth on a certain level.
Okay, I'd like to make a brief cut here and move on to the question of foreign policy as we try to read the tea leaves about where the new leadership might be heading. Sven Hansen mentioned bold moves. One question many people abroad are asking is, could there be bold moves even in the South China Sea?
The waters and seas off China host some of the world's primary trade arteries, and they potentially contain significant reserves of oil and gas. This region has also provided the backdrop for China's assertion of its sovereignty. China recently blocked access to the Scarborough Reef, which the Philippines views as part of its economic zone. Further north, Chinese patrol boats confronted Japanese vessels off a set of islands administered by Tokyo. The dispute over the islands is a reminder of Beijing's ambitions as a Pacific power, ambitions that have increased friction with the U.S. Just how far is Beijing prepared to go to assert its power? Are negotiated solutions possible, or will the conflicts escalate?
Gudrun Wacker, we do, of course, have two different geographic areas here. Let's start out with the South China Sea, because China has just rejected the latest ASEAN attempt to promote a code of conduct for that area. What do you think? Are we likely to see a continued expansion of Chinese assertiveness in that area?
Well, maybe China has rejected a multilateral solution so far, but it's negotiating. It's trying to keep things bilateral because it's easier to have bilateral negotiations with Vietnam or with the Philippines than with on a multilateral level, especially since the United States are now more active members of some of the regional organizations, and China fears that the U.S. will sort of interfere or take sides in this conflict. Or the controversy about the territorial issue. I think there are several issues that are important here. One is the freedom of navigation. I mean, these are the lifelines for transporting goods not only from the Near East to East Asia, but also from Europe, for example. So we should be interested in this topic as well. And China does not challenge that. There were stronger efforts to shelve the problem and do some joint exploration in the region about 10 years ago. But it came to nothing, and now China says, look who is exploring for oil. It's the Philippines, it's Vietnam, and we have nothing. So it has not really worked for them.
Is this resource-driven? Is that the main reason for the concern, both in regard to this and the disputed islands in the East Chinese Sea?
There are several issues, and resources, presumed or actual resources, is one of them. It's also about fishing grounds. And it's also, there is some geopolitical or geostrategic aspect to it, and a historical aspect, especially in the case of the East China Sea, where you have a territorial dispute between Japan and China. So you have several layers of the problem, and I think that we can fairly say that in the last 4 years, let's say since the Olympic Games, China has become more self-assertive in staking its claims and saying the sovereignty, everything that concerns the territorial integrity of China is in China's core interest and can't be messed with by other countries. And so we see a stronger stance, with the effect that all of China's neighbors are now concerned about whether the peaceful rise of China will be so peaceful after all. And this should be a concern to China.
And I'd like to get the take of our other two guests on exactly that issue. If you look at Xi Jinping's background, Sven Hansen, he has quite an elite education. He also has very strong military ties, and apparently he has quite a confident air. What would you expect in terms of assertiveness? And could it even come to a real showdown here if, for example, he was under pressure to prove his credibility as a new leader?
I think you cannot exclude a showdown, but he is not known for adventures. So he's quite a sober, rational person. The problem is that there might be situations where you